think about those foundational stories, the myths that tell us where everything really began. Across so many cultures, you find these whispers of creation, first moments, primal energies coming together. Today, we're plunging into just such a genesis, the Aurelda Genesis creation myth.
Yeah, and we've got quite a bit to draw on for this deep dive, Arlo, the Thurston 7, 4, 6, 7, and also the Book of Remembering. Our mission here is really to uncover the origins of Aurelda.
Right.
And understand the central roles played by these two key figures from way back then, Ithanel and Mazarin.
Absolutely. And we're going to explore the creation of something called the Lumina, which is fascinating, and also the conflict that tragically unfolded between them.
And a really powerful prophecy, too, which kind of forms a cornerstone of Aureldan understanding later on.
Exactly. So prepare for some really interesting connections, because this is where the story truly takes hold. You are not separate, you are the song remembered.
That ancient whisper just sort of hangs there, doesn't it?
It really does. Makes you think.
Immediately makes you ask, what is this song the myth talks about? And, well, how connected are we to it?
Exactly.
So today we're doing a deep dive, really getting into the Aurelda Genesis creation myth, based on the sources you short. We want to trace, the very beginnings of Aurelda, understand the forces shaping it right from the start.
Yeah, and it's not just about retelling an old story. We're trying to understand the currents beneath it, the foundations this myth lays out.
Like uncovering the original blueprint.
Precisely. The original blueprint of Aurelda.
Okay, so let's start unpacking that blueprint. At the very beginning, we've got these figures, Ithanel and Mazarin, primordial beings.
Right, existing before anything else, before the kingdoms.
And we need to look at their roles, and well, critically, this sacred sexual union between them. That's what birthed the Lumina, this key energy. It seems their connection, their actual sexuality, was fundamental to the act of creation.
Integral. Yeah.
Absolutely. It wasn't passive. It was, deeply significant, generative.
But then things take a turn.
They do. With Mazarin. He develops this desire to, control the Lumina after it's created.
And that desire leads to his transformation, right, into Xibal'Zul.
A really dramatic shift.
Yeah. And that transformation, it seems like it had huge consequences. We'll need to explore how it brings in this idea of forgetting.
And the emergence of Kalzira as well.
It's like a ripple effect from that initial disruption.
It is. And to really get it, I think we need to look at the names. Ithanel, Mazarin, Xibal'Zul, Kalzira.
What meanings are hidden there?
Potentially, yeah. What do they tell us about their roles? And we should also revisit that core theme, sacred sexual energy, how the sexuality of these first beings literally shaped Aurelda.
Right. And it all seems connected to the Book of Ithanel and its prophecy, two become one.
That prophecy feels important. Like it might hold the key to later events, maybe even resolution.
Suggests things might come full circle, back to unity.
That's the feeling, a potential return. So let's start right back at the beginning. Who were Ithanel and Mazarin in that ancient time?
Well, the sources, they paint them as these primordial beings, the very first ones in the story of Aurelda.
Predating everything.
Exactly. Before history as we know it. They weren't gods or kings like we might think of later, more like fundamental forces.
Yeah.
Entities.
And their connection is key.
Yeah. What really stands out is that connection. They're a pair, and that seems essential for the creation that follows.
That primordial link sets the stage. So how did their union actually bring the Lumina into existence?
This is where the myth gets really potent, I think. The Lumina, this core essence of Aurelda, it wasn't just formed, it was born.
Born from their sacred sexual union.
Yes. Their sexuality coming together in that sacred act, that was the spark, the source of this energy, not just a side effect.
It's a fascinating perspective, isn't it? It really elevates sexuality. It's not just procreation. It's a foundational creative power.
The intimacy between them is literally the wellspring of everything that comes after in Aurelda.
And the sources, while they're not explicit, they hint at the energy involved, don't they?
They do. The deeper questions posed about certain scenes mention the significance of their erotic climax in understanding the impact. It just underscores the immense power in their union.
Power that birthed a world's essence.
Exactly.
That emphasis on the potent energy. It really drives home the sacredness of their connection and how it links directly to creation. But this harmony doesn't last.
No, it doesn't. What shifts things?
It's Mazarin's desire for control.
Right. After Lumina is created, he wants to what, govern it?
Pretty much not just be part of creating it, but to hold the reins, a desire for dominion over something born from a shared act.
And that desire isn't fulfilled. He's rejected.
That's what the narrative suggests, denied singular control. What do you make of that rejection? Why is that the turning point?
Well, it feels like the myth is saying the Lumina, because it was born from unity, from a shared creation. It just can't be controlled by one without breaking something fundamental.
So his desire goes against its very nature.
Yeah, against the balance. And that rejection, that's the catalyst. He transforms into Xibal'Zul. It's like a fall.
From primordial creator to something else.
Defined by that thwarted desire.
And this isn't just a personal change for him, is it? It unleashes things into Aurelda.
Oh, absolutely. Mazeran becoming Xibal'Zul is directly tied to the start of forgetting.
And this isn't just, forgetting where you put your keys.
No, no. The sources hint this ancient forgetting connects to a modern force, mentioning them and exile later on. It feels like Mazaran's fall somehow opened a door.
To what? An obscuring of knowledge? A loss of connection?
Something like that. A fundamental severing from the past, from awareness.
It implies that wanting control, when it's denied and turns destructive, it can fracture understanding, cut us off from truth.
And alongside the forgetting, Kalzira emerges.
Right. Now, the sources aren't super clear on what Kalzira is exactly.
But the timing is significant.
Definitely. It arises directly because of Xibal'Zul's transformation.
Right.
So it must embody some part of that disruption.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a manifestation of the imbalance he created.
So it's a chain reaction.
Yeah.
Sacred union creates, desire for control corrupts, corruption unleashes forgetting, and Kalzira.
Rooted in that initial desire.
Makes you think about the names again. Do they give us more clues?
Often they do in these old stories. Let's think about Ithanel. The name itself,
Yeah.
it kind of resonates with creation, doesn't it? The source of the Lumina.
Maybe related to light, origin, the generative side.
Yeah, feels right. And Mazeran, given what happens next.
The desire for control, the transformation. Maybe his name links to ideas of dominion, grasping for power, something that disrupts flow.
That fix. And then Xibal'Zul, the name he takes after the fall. It has that Zul suffix.
Which pops up in other negative contexts, yeah.
Suggesting corruption, a darkening, a twisting of who he was, embodying the consequences.
Okay, and Kalzira? Less defined, maybe?
The Zira part, coming right after Xibal'Zul's actions. Maybe it means an outcome, a result of that disruption, perhaps even a force that helps perpetuate the forgetting.
It's like the names are a mini summary of the whole myth.
In a way. And at the heart of it all is this idea of sacred sexual energy.
Absolutely. The myth really hammers home that the sexual energy, the sexuality of Ithanel and Mazeran, it wasn't just incidental, it was foundational.
To the Lumina, and so to all of Aurelda, the primal creative force.
And we see echoes later on, right? Like with Exal and Tuolna.
Ah, yes. Where the misuse of sexual energy is shown as a threat.
A threat to the Luna and to the prophecy we mentioned. It really highlights how powerful this concept is throughout Aurelda's story.
It can create, but it can also be used to corrupt.
That later encounter really drives home the power of that original sacred union and the danger when it's perverted.
Which brings us neatly to the Book of Ithanel. Seems like a really significant text.
Yeah, presented as this key source of prophecies. And the big one for this discussion seems to be two become one.
Considering they started as a unit, Ithanel and Mazeran, then separated, causing all this discord.
This prophecy feels like it's hinting at a way back, right? A reunification, healing that original split.
It suggests a cycle, unity, separation, but maybe a destined return to wholeness.
And when you think about later parts of the story, like potential merging of individuals hinted at in the sources.
It strengthens the idea that to become one isn't just a vague phrase. It speaks to a core principle of balance, of restoration in Aurelda.
Okay, so let's try to pull this together. The Genesis myth gives us Ithanel and Mazeran,
Primordial beings.
whose sacred sexual union births the Lumina.
But Mazeran's desire for control leads to his fall, becoming Xibal'Zul.
And this transformation had huge repercussions for Aurelda, right? It brought in something called forgetting.
Yes, forgetting, and also Kalzira.
Okay, let's take those one by one. What was the forgetting?
Well, inferring mostly from the fractured remembers, it seems to signify a loss of connection, a severing of that inherent unity the Lumina once fostered.
So not like forgetting your keys, but more like forgetting how things are connected, a fading of shared memory.
Exactly, a fading of shared understanding across Aurelda, loss of that resonance.
Got it. And a Kalzira, that sounds equally bad, maybe worse.
It does sound ominous. The sources, again, mainly the fractured remembers, describe Kalzira as ruptures, instability.
Ruptures, like earthquakes. More metaphorical.
Perhaps both. Think of it as cracks appearing in the very fabric of reality. A direct consequence of Mazarin becoming Xibal'Zul and the forgetting that followed.
So a world that was once harmoniously woven together by the Lumina starts to fragment, both in its collective memory and its fundamental structure.
Precisely. It's a profound wounding.
Which makes you wonder about the names themselves. Do the sources give us any clues about what Ithanel, Mazarin, Xibal'Zul, and Kalzira actually mean?
Explicit definitions? No, not really. But we can definitely infer meaning from how they're consistently used and the context.
Okay, like Ithanel.
Ithanel is consistently portrayed as this central, radiant figure, often associated with light, with a sense of primary importance. The core, maybe.
And Mazarin, before the change.
Mazarin is often presented as the other half of the light, or sometimes the shadow to Ithanel's flame. It suggests this duality, an essential counterpart to that primary radiance.
Two halves of a whole, initially.
Exactly. That initial connection, that beloved partnership before the fall. It really highlights the tragedy of what happened.
Yeah, it really does. Okay, so then Xibal'Zul.
Xibal'Zul, in stark contrast to Mazarin, is consistently linked with negativity, with causing the forgetting, causing the instability.
So, darkness, chaos.
It strongly implies something like that, yes. Darkness, chaos, perhaps a severing force, something that breaks connection.
And Kalzira lines up with that.
Absolutely. The repeated references to ruptures, tremors, it points very strongly to a meaning associated with breaking, fracturing, or just fundamental instability, things coming apart.
It's like the story of the fall is encoded right there in the names. Now, you mentioned a text earlier, the Book of Ithanel. What's its significance here?
Yes. The Book of Ithanel seems to be this vital repository of ancient wisdom. It holds crucial insights into Aurelda's genesis and into the destinies of both Ithanel and Mazarin. It's presented as a really key source for understanding their world's foundational principles.
And does it contain prophecies? I think I read something about that.
It does. A very significant one, actually. The prophecy of two become one.
Two become one, relating to Ithanel and Mazarin.
Correctly, yes. It speaks to their original cherished connection, that inherent resonance they had before the first forgetting, as the Fractured Remembers calls it.
So it points back to their unity.
Exactly. Echoes of the Xiba captures it beautifully, saying, two souls, two resonance keepers, destined to find each other, lifetime after lifetime, two halves of the same whole.
Wow, two halves of the same whole. So this prophecy really emphasizes their fundamental unity, the idea that they were always meant to be together, forming this complete harmonious whole.
Precisely.
Which makes Mazarin's desire to control the Lumina, to shatter that balance. It makes it feel even more tragic, more impactful.
It does. The prophecy suggests there was this natural order, a destined harmony, that was disrupted by Mazarin's choices. But maybe. It also hints at a potential for eventual reconciliation, a return to that original oneness.
Interesting. Okay, so let's try and bring this all together then. We start with Ithanel and Mazarin.
Right. These foundational figures.
Their sacred sexual union gives birth to the Lumina, the actual life force of Aurelda.
The connective energy.
Then Mazarin wants dominion over it, gets rejected somehow, and transforms into Xibal'Zul.
Which causes the devastating forgetting, the loss of connection, and Kalzira, the ruptures and instability.
And underpinning all this, we have the Book of Ithanel and its powerful prophecy of two become one, highlighting their original unity and maybe a path forward.
It seems that way. And we really have to underscore the profound significance of sacred sexuality in this specific creation myth. It wasn't just, an incidental detail.
No, it was central.
It was the divine creative force made manifest, intrinsically linked to the Lumina, to the very foundation Aurelda was built on.
And the Book of Ithanel preserves that ancient wisdom, including the prophecy. It paints such a vivid picture, a world born from deep connection, then deeply scarred by division.
It really does. And this Aureldian Genesis myth, with these powerful themes of duality, creation through union, the origin of imbalance, it really echoes creation stories you find in countless cultures, doesn't it?
That's true. The patterns are striking sometimes.
But also that enduring hope for unity.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How does understanding this ancient beginning shed light on Aurelda's later struggles? Especially this pervasive forgetting, and maybe more personally, What does this idea of sacred union, of connection being creative, suggest for us? About, creating things or overcoming divisions in our own lives?
These myths, even from fantasy worlds, they often tap into something universal, don't they? Questions about where we come from, about power, about existence.
So we end up back at that whisper. You are not separate. You are the song remembered. Maybe, just maybe, digging into these old stories, understanding Aurelda's beginnings. Maybe that's part of remembering.
Remembering a deeper connection, finding our own place in that song.
Yeah. It certainly gives you something to think about, something profound.
Given these similarities, what might be the fundamental human understanding or maybe the archetypal pattern that these stories are all tapping into? Why do these narratives, these stories of primal beginnings and the emergence of darkness or imbalance, hold such enduring power? How do they shape our understanding of the world, both in a place like Aurelda and maybe, just maybe, in our own experiences too? Something to ponder.
The Aurelda Inner Circle is an inclusive community that combines ancient wisdom for modern living, guiding unseen seekers through inclusive storytelling, breathwork meditation, and creative healing to awaken their authentic self. Join today and begin your journey at Aurelda.com.